Hello, welcome to the Oracle Code online session about building beautiful apps on data from everywhere with Oracle Application Express. My name is Carsten Sarski and I will walk you through the next about 45 minutes with an overview on Application Express, how to load data, how to access external data, and finally how to build applications. I'm a member of the Oracle Application Express development team since 2016, and I'm working on all sorts of integration of Application Express with external data sources. A few seconds on the safe harbor statement. As with many presentations, also this presentation is not a commitment to deliver any code or functionality, and of course this should not be the thing which you rely upon when making purchasing decisions. Okay, let's start. What is Oracle Application Express? Application Express is the database-centric web application development framework of Oracle. And what does that mean? Oracle Application Express is focused on the Oracle database. So all the low-code development happens out of the Oracle database. We can build almost all sorts of applications with Application Express, whether it's desktop or mobile, whether it's applications to visualize data, to maintain data. But the key thing is that Apex is very focused on SQL and PL/SQL, so the environment of the Oracle database. So once you're able to formulate or to solve a problem with SQL, Apex is the perfect the perfect framework to build the application or the user interface on top of this. We will see that at many places, right? When we have a SQL query which is able to compute or to fetch some data, then Apex makes it very easy to transport that data to the end user. It may be a report where data is presented in tabular form. It may be a chart. It may be a calendar component. So once we have the SQL worked out, presenting the data using an Apex component, using an Apex widget, is a very small step based on that point. And so there are many use cases for Application Express, right? So the first and most important, also the broadest one, is just rapid application development. So people who are working with SQL and PL/SQL are able to build opportunistic tactical applications, not just in weeks or months, but really in days, sometimes even in hours, right? And this low-code approach even allows a citizen developer to build powerful apps. The only thing which is really required is some basic knowledge about tables, SQL and PL/SQL, or expressed otherwise, how the database works, right? And this can also be used to replace spreadsheets, of course. Spreadsheets are used everywhere to collect data, to distribute data, and this is very easily turned into a multi-user application with Apex. And once the Apex application is there, the link to that application can be sent around and everybody can access that data just with their browser. There are no longer multiple copies of the same spreadsheet. There is no longer multiple sources of truth, which is the right one. And it's the central Apex application. Everybody knows where to go to get the latest set of data. And other use cases are reporting style applications with charts and reporting, extending enterprise applications to meet non-standard requirements. And Apex provides enough flexibility to build additional workflows on top of this to enhance applications with customized dashboards and do several things. So when we look at the things customers are doing with Apex right now, then we see a great variety of applications being used and being built just today, right? And a few details on applications. I already mentioned Apex runs inside the Oracle database. It's part of the Oracle database. We call that a no-cost option or a no-cost fully supported feature. So as long as the database is licensed, and by the way, even Oracle XE, the free database, is a license. So once there is an Oracle database license, then there is an Apex license. And the latest release of Apex, that is Apex 19.1, this runs on all database releases starting with 11G release 2. So older database versions are also able to run Apex, but then you need an older Apex version, right? As I said, Apex runs on all database editions, Enterprise Edition, Standard Edition, and Express Edition. It's included with Oracle Cloud Services, so once you subscribe to a database as a service instance, then Application Express is available there as well. There is Exadata Express, where you can get an Apex workspace, and there is a no-cost evaluation instance, which you can use to play with Apex, to try it out, to see whether the features suit you, and this is available on apex.oracle.com. Apex.oracle.com, by the way, also contains lots of collateral information, presentations, tutorials, existing success stories, tutorials, and lots of other resources. So it's really worthwhile to check this site out. So the installation is very straightforward. It's included by default when you download the Oracle database. Most often, when you download the database and install it, you will see that the Apex version is an older one. So it's recommended after database installation, go to apex.oracle.com and download the latest Apex release, which is as of today in May 2019, 19.1. Okay, Apex comes in a three-tier architecture, as almost every web application framework. So the difference to other frameworks, of course, is the role which the Oracle database plays here on the right-hand side. So we still have the database, we have some middle tier, and we have the browser. And unlike Java or PHP or .NET environment, where the business logic resides on the middle tier, Apex is a bit different. In Apex, all the business logic, all the logic to generate HTML markup, to execute workflows, it all happens in the Oracle database, right? The middle tier is more or less a dispatcher. So the middle tier gets a request from the browser, dispatches that to the database responds with the HTML markup, static files, maybe JSON responses, and the middle tier passes that through to the browser. All HTML markup, all the business logic, it all happens in the Oracle database, right? Apex is completely built on top of the Oracle database, which means the Apex engine as such, so the thing which controls what HTML is to be generated, is also runs in the Oracle database. And that is a good opportunity to talk a bit about how Apex as a web application framework works. The most important thing about Application Express is that it's metadata driven. So Apex defines, so to say, a data model for applications, right? When you think about a web application consists of pages. So in Apex, in the database, there is a table which contains pages. Each page is a row. So then your page has regions, right, with different content. There is another table, regions. Each region is a row. You have form items. You name it. There is a table containing all the form items. Authentication. You have metadata for different region types, for charts, for reports, and all this kind of stuff. When you think about of everything what makes a web application, Apex defines a data model to store all this. So when we create an Apex application, we can think about rows being inserted into a table, and the attributes of these rows, the column values, determine what our application actually does. And the Apex application is stored in several tables, and when the application is run, data is being collected from those tables, and all the application pages are generated dynamically on the fly. And since this all happens inside the Oracle database, we really have zero latency database access, because the code runs also in the Oracle database. Fetching a row from a table is very cheap. All the SQL is optimized inside the Apex engine. And so Apex applications are really snappy, right? Because all database access happens in the database anyway. So it doesn't come at a cost compared to when you execute a database access from the middle tier. Right, and of course the sweet spot of Apex is when the Apex engine runs in the database, and when, for instance, a report is to be displayed on top of a local table, then this is of course the sweet spot, because the application metadata is fetched very quickly, and also the local table, the actual data, which is to be displayed, is also fetched very easy. Data access is really cheap, and as it was mentioned on the previous slide, it's really zero latency data access. However, in today's times, that's of course not enough, right? The times where all data was just in one and the same database, this is pretty much over, right? We have to live with the situation that data is distributed among multiple systems, and Apex can deal with these cases as well, right? So we could have other Oracle databases with enterprise data, and the Oracle database has an answer for this for years now. So we can create database links to access data in other Oracle databases from the Apex database. We can access REST and SOAP services, so RESTful services, SOAP web services from Apex over the HTTP protocol. And as we will see, Apex really makes REST services a first-class data source. So we will see we can access REST data as easy as we can access local tables. And there is even REST-enabled SQL, which is a REST-based interface to a remote Oracle database. So this allows to access an external Oracle database, but without a database link. So imagine there is an Oracle database running on the cloud, and you have an Oracle database running on premises. Then a database link from the on-premise database to the cloud might be very difficult. So we can use REST-enabled SQL for this. And then we have the HTTP connection to the REST endpoint in the cloud database, and the SQL is executed and results are being passed back over HTTPS again, right? So Apex allows to access data from almost everywhere, right? And we will start with a very simple example to get warm with Apex, to see how it works. And we will just work with a local file, a spreadsheet or a local file. And I have a CSV file for now. So we have that file which contains, let's say, movie data from the internet. And we will upload that file to Application Express and then start building an application. And the final result will more or less look like this. And that's what we will do right now. Right? So I have installed the latest release of Application Express 19.1. I have prepared a workspace, so everything is ready to start the demo right now. So here we are in the Application Express environment. So once you log into Application Express, your first screen will look like this. So you have the application builder, which is the central to build and maintain your application. We have a web interface, so to say, to execute SQL commands. So this is our SQL plus in the browser, if you will. And we have a team development area. This is a minimalistic project management system, so to say. You can file features and issues and bugs and track them there. And then there we have the app gallery with predefined sample and productivity applications. So these applications in the app gallery are ready to use. And some of them are just sample applications which show you how things work in Apex. Other ones, for instance, like ptrack or the bug tracker or a meeting minutes app, are ready to use productivity applications which should provide a value right after installation. We are about to build a new application, and the CSV file is available. So here is the CSV file I just mentioned. It's just some movie data. And let's start building an application. So we go to the app builder. This workspace is, as you can see, it's empty. So let's create a new application. And we will create an application from a file and simply drag the CSV file into Application Express. So Apex will now show us a preview of the data. So we can see that we could tweak on the parser settings, but these are all good actually. We could even have a closer look into the data by clicking the Configure button. That will show us a bit more than just the 5 rows. And as you can see, that is quite some more. What we can see here is the character set is not right. So let's just fix that and save. So now let's try it again. And now our data looks pretty good, right? we can save, so we can have a look at the columns. So Apex detected those columns. It also detected data types. So this looks pretty okay, and we are good to go. So let's provide a table name, and I will name that movies from CSV. And then let's simply load that data. So, and just after a few seconds, these a bit less than 10,000 rows have been loaded. And we can just continue to we could review the table right now to see whether Apex created everything as we wanted. But I think that should be okay. We will just continue to the Create Application Wizard to build an application on top of that table we just have created. So there we are. Based on the table we just have created, Apex also proposes a few pages for our application. So I will call it my movies application. Right, we will have a home page. Then it says there is a page with what we call an interactive report. And I don't like the title from CSV, so I would like to name that movies report. Save that again, and I would like to have activity reporting enabled, and I would also like to have an about page, because that's what we always need. And then I think these things are just okay. So let's see what Apex generates if we now hit create application. And now Apex does exactly the things I mentioned before. So Apex will create or will insert rows into the data model for application. We will get one row in the application table, we will get a few rows in the application pages table, we will get a few rows in the application page regions table, and so on. Right? And this, everything you can see here is metadata based on tables. So Apex stores everything in tables, and so there is no point in Apex where code is being generated. Right? Every setting we are about to make can be reversed. We can change everything at any time because the whole thing is metadata driven and 100% dynamic. Let's run this thing. And I have to log in. And actually, this is you don't notice it when working with Apex, but that has been the switch from development to runtime mode, right? This is now our running applications, and if we wanted to have somebody else to review that application, we would just copy that link, right? Put it into an email and, hi, dear colleagues, please have a look into that application. Paste the link, best regards, and you're done, right? If somebody else logs into the application, of course, that developer toolbar in the lower corner, which allows me to control the application as a developer, that won't be visible, right? A runtime user can really only use the application. Right now, I'm both developer and runtime user, so I have that control panel here as well. So let's have a look into the movies report. And here you can see what we call an interactive report, right? We see the data in tabular form. Of course, this needs a few UI tweaks. That's not ready yet. But when you think about about the work we have invested here and what the end users actually get, so I'm searching for things, so the end user can easily type in a search here, and interactive report will automatically filter the results for, in that case, babe, wherever it occurs in the row. Of course, you can have more structured filters as well. So while we could, for instance, we are interested in movies with a revenue of more than 500 millions, 3, 1, 2, 3, and of course this has to be creator. So then we see, okay, these are the big ones, the blockbusters, right? So that's something we can already do as an end user. So the end user gets a very powerful tool to play with data, right? But of course, a developer can also do things, right? So if we change into the edit mode, then we will get to page designer, right? And page designer is the control center, so to say, for an Apex page. So we see a structure view on the Apex page. So there's a breadcrumb region. There is our report region here. And in the report region, we now are interested, where does this data come from, right? And this comes, as we can see here, from a table, right? So this is the metadata we are storing in the Apex engine. That region is driven from the table movies from CSV, right? So, and we can change that if we wish to use a SQL query instead. So, and now when I'm using a SQL query, I can start playing with this, right? So maybe I don't want to see the production companies, I don't want to see the language, the IMDb, and let's remove these as well. But I only want to see the blockbusters. So revenue 500, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So now I make the change as a developer, right? So the basic data, the base data set of that interactive report is now just the movies with a revenue of more than $500 million in that case, or euros, whatever, right? And of course, the end user can still say, oh, I want to see only movies above 600 million, and that still works, but the end user will never be able to see movies with less than $500 million because that is not part of the base data set again. So the developer determines the base data set and the end user can play with this data, right? And just by adding a component to your page which says interactive report on top of a SQL query. So let's have a look at the dashboard page. And here we see a few charts which the Create Application Wizard automatically built for us. So we see a breakdown by language, a breakdown by genre. And maybe I want to have a pie chart as well, which shows the relationship of blockbusters versus other movies. And I mentioned in the beginning, it's all about the question, can I solve my problem with SQL? And the SQL query of to determine the share of blockbusters versus the share of non-blockbusters would be something like this. So this is 100. This is 100 million. So we said we want to work with 500 million. So let's change that. So, and once I have worked out that SQL query, we can start adding Apex components, right? So go back to page 4. We are again in Page Designer. So then we can drag components from our palette to the page, and there is the chart, and this is now a new chart region. Now I want to have it there. So, and this is menu. So, and now we can start configure the chart. So the chart attributes, this is here by default it's a bar chart. I would like to work with a pie chart, right? And now Page Designer shows me, when Page Designer shows something in red, something is missing, right? And of course we need data to drive the chart. And again, we have the section with the data source, and the basic Apex principle kicks in again. We need a SQL query. Once we have a SQL query, then things are good. So we paste that SQL query in. That validates. And then we map columns. So we have a label column and a value column. And now our chart has been configured. So we have provided a data source, and we mapped one column of the SQL query to the label and another one to the value. And now Apex knows what to do. The data from the SQL query will be used to draw a pie chart onto the screen. So, and this is what we get, right? We have a share of 170 billion for the blockbusters, and this is all the rest, right? And that pretty much indicates how easy it is to build applications, to build visualizations, to add components once you have access to the data, right? Access to the data is something the Oracle database provides really well. SQL is super powerful. You can do lots of sophisticated analysis just by authoring SQL queries. And once you have that, the SQL query may be simple, it may be complex, it might be sophisticated. Once you have the SQL query, it's very easy and super quick to build an Apex component, an Apex page, which works on that data. Okay, so that is the simple example. And as always, that movies from CSV, it's a table in our database. So in the beginning, I said SQL Workshop is our SQL Plus on the web. So we can type SQL commands here. But there is also an object browser which provides a more convenient access. And we can see our movies from CSV table here, right, with the columns which have been created during data load. We see the data, so everything is there. And we can, of course, reuse that table. We can build forms on that table and use that table at many places. It's a normal database table right now, right? And the process from the beginning with the CSV file to getting to a dashboard page and a simple reporting interface was just a few minutes, right? Uploading the file, build the application, maybe extend the application a little bit, and then you're done. You see, it's really, Apex allows to build very powerful things in very short time. It can be really quick and really powerful. Okay, but that's the local database, right? So let's go back to the slides and talk a bit about external data sources. And I already mentioned that Apex treats, for instance, a RESTful service similar to a local table. So we will be able to use a RESTful service the same way as we used the table before. But before doing that, we need to talk a bit about the RESTful service we want to use, right? So when we think about a RESTful service, we might think about this example here, and that is the GitHub REST API. You can see that with the URL. It says api.github.com. And I looked up the API endpoint to fetch all repositories of a given user, and in that case, it's the Oracle user, right? And once you execute that, you will get a JSON document. And if you have a closer look at that JSON document, we can see that it's an array. We can see that with the square bracket right at the beginning. That was too quick, sorry. Then we have an object. And if we open that in a real browser, we would see that this array contains multiple objects. Each object represents a repository. And we can see the ID, node ID, name, full name, and so on. All these things are object attributes. And we can already see that this can be treated as it was a table, right? So we have the table. The name of the table would be more or less this one, so the endpoint URL. Then the array is the table, each object in the array is a row, and each attribute within that object is a column, right? Of course, this has limitations, right? If there are nested structures, so this contains an array, which contains an array, which contains an array, then this approach doesn't work anymore. But most of the business REST APIs are flat and just easy to treat as a table. And when we think about Apex again, then we've seen once you have a SQL query or a table, which gets you the data, then we can very easily build all sorts of Apex components on top of this. So the actual challenge now is we would need to get this one as it was a table. And once we had that, we could easily build Apex components, right? And exactly that is one of the new features which was introduced in Apex 18 a year ago in May 2018. And that was functionality to treat REST services as it were tables, right? Of course, Apex needs to know something about the RESTful service. It needs to know the REST endpoint URL. It needs to know about the JSON structure. It needs to know how to call the REST endpoint, which parameters to pass, and this all needs to be brought to Apex. And Apex, we already said that, is metadata driven. So as we are storing metadata for our application, like pages, reports, regions, forum items, and so on, we can also store that information about the RESTful service as metadata in tables. And once we have that, Apex should be able to fetch that data, to parse the JSON, and to provide a table-like view on top of that data. And that's what we would look into right now. So we will create what we call a web source module. So let me grab the URL, And let me go back to our application, which we built. So that's our movies application, but GitHub repositories are not movies. So let me quickly build a new application. Let's stay clean. I will now not build the application from a file. I will just build a new application. So that is GitHub repositories. And I won't create any new pages. I just hit create application to create a minimum framework. Right? So we have created the application, we have the minimum set of pages, and we can start building this application step by step. So the first thing is Apex needs to get some know-how about the RESTful service we are working on. So this is done in shared components, and shared components in Apex are components which can be used across the application. So every page can use shared components, right? So what's in there? So we have lots of options here, right? For instance, list of values drive select lists, radio groups, that's very frequently used for form items. And it's obvious here you create a list of values, for instance, departments or customer types. You create that list of values once for the applications and use it among several places, right? And there are similar things, lists, settings for the navigation menu, themes and templates which control the layout, authorizations, authentications, all sorts of control things for an applications are edited here. And as I said before, all this is stored as metadata and this as part of your applications. And Apex uses that at runtime to generate application pages. In the lower left corner, we have the section web source modules. And the web source module is a reference to an external data source, in this case a RESTful service. And of course, for a new application, nothing is there already, so we create a new web source module. We create that from scratch. And Apex now wants to have the URL endpoint and the name. So this is the GitHub repositories. And let's even make the username dynamic. GitHub user, right? And the GitHub user is Oracle. So with this column syntax, we denoted a variable part of the URL. And the default value to start working with will be Oracle. This will allow us to pass parameters to that RESTful service as well. So let's click on next. Apex will now check the web service URL to see whether it works, whether we can do a connection, and it now proposes a split of the URL to a server part and a service part. And actually that's not the right proposal. So we want to have just API GitHub.com as the server part and users, GitHub user repositories as the service part. So if we create another web source module for another service in the GitHub API, then it would reuse that remote server and we would have the one-to-many relationship between one remote server and several web source module. So, okay. So we don't need authentication for this, so we can hit discover. And now Apex again invoked that RESTful service, it fetched the JSON and it sampled the JSON to see which columns are there and which data types, right? So we see a preview of the sampled data, just a subset of columns, I think it was 15, and just a subset of rows. We can review the data profile here. Right, and so Apex discovered 95 columns here, right? And this doesn't look too bad, so let's create the web source module. And all that discovered metadata for the web source module has now been stored in the Apex dictionary. So our application now has a lot of know-how about this REST endpoint for the GitHub API. And this is, for instance, the URL, it's the operation, HTTP GET operation, and it's that's the most important thing, that's the data profile, which tells us, oh, this returns JSON, and it returns, as you can see, a huge amount of columns. And I think that's a bit much, right? So let's, for now, let's reduce that list a bit, right? We have that visible attribute here, and that controls whether a column will be offered to the developer later on when developers are building components. And offering 95 columns all the time might be a bit much. So let's first hide select all. So let's select all first. Then let's hide the selected columns. And now let's make the few we are interested in visible again. So we want to have the ID, we want to have the URL, we want to have the name, the size, the forks, and I will just fetch a few. So the avatar URL might be good, the repository URL. So, and this is all stuff we don't need right now. The full name is interesting. Push add date is interesting. When has it been created? And then I would like to see the watchers count. Open issues count is nice. Stargazers count is nice. And watchers count is nice. And I think that should be enough for now. Let's save that information. And let's now reduce that list, and we have 14 attributes left. So Apex still has knowledge about all the 95 columns, but we have designated 14 of these as, so to say, as columns of interest. And what that means, we will see that in a minute, right? So save these things, and let's now start using that web source module. I will create a page in our application, and it will be a report. Again, let's use an interactive report, and that will be the GitHub repositories. Navigation menu entry is nice. And now we will be picking the data source, and that's what we used before, right? We could use a local table again, right? That would be our movies from CSV, but of course that's not what we want to do right now. We want to use a web source, and we just created the GitHub repositories, and we just see the 14 visible columns of interest here, right? The other columns are hidden, and that's what we want, right? That makes working with this web source module very easy. And that's it, right? We can provide a few parameters. So what we have seen is that the GitHub user was defaulted with Oracle, and we will keep that. So let's now create the page. And once that has been done, we are redirected to the control center for that page, to Page Designer. And again, we see our interactive report. And now it doesn't reference a SQL query or a table, it references the web source module, right? But it's pretty much the same, right? The interactive report is driven from a data source, and that's now a RESTful service. So let's start that page, log in again. And here we go. We see data from the RESTful service. We can again search for text, right, and filter the data as the end user. I think it would be nice, since this one is actually an image, right, it would be nice to display that image, right? So let's try to do that. And that's the avatar URL column. And it's very easy to treat these interactive reports. And I will just give you one example for this, right? Let's go to the columns, and these are the report columns. We have our avatar URL column here. For now, it's displayed as plain text, and we will use, and here are all the column attributes which allow us to control how Apex renders that very report column. And here is a section HTML expression. So now we will turn it into an HTML IMG tag. And then that shouldn't be. So we want to have an image with a height of 50 pixels. So, but what's the URL is actually that column. Right? So we use a placeholder here and mention the name as a template placeholder, right? So Apex will take that HTML expression and replace the placeholder with the referenced column, which in this case is the same column, right? Save that, run the report again, and we can see we have an image display right now. So we could also, this is the URL to the repository, we could make a link from the name, right? So let's do that as well. So first of all, I think we don't need to display that URL column, so let's hide it, right? And here is the name column, and once we click that name, we want to redirect to that URL. So Apex allows to designate a link column, and here we can define the link. So, and we simply link to URL, and that the URL comes from another column. Save and run. So, and here is our link right now. So if I open that, then I get a link to that column. Of course, this is just another API link, so we should use one of the other columns, but basically this is how things work, right? We can easily build links. When I look at these things here, the published ad and the created ad, these are actually date columns, right? But the display is a bit cumbersome, so let's do something which looks nicer. So we have the created ad, and of course we have format masks for date, right? And there we go. And a special Apex format mask. So first you can use, of course, the typical date format mask like dd.mm.yyyy, for instance. Right? But Apex has a very special format mask, which is called synths. And let me use that for the pushed ad column as well. And let's see what happens now. Right? And this is much nicer. So we get a human readable thing, and we can still order by these columns, right? So ordering still works, of course. So this is an interactive report, and I think you can imagine that this can be tweaked more and more and more to get a really nice overview on that very GitHub data source. So, but let's have a chart here as well. I think that's what needed to make this complete. So it would be very nice to, for instance, to have a bar chart on the watchers count here. So again, I created a chart before on that movies from CSV table. So let's now do the same on the web source module. So we have a chart, watchers by repository. And again, we can now select the data source. We will again use a web source. We will use the GitHub repositories, and we will map columns. And the label will be the name of the repository, and the watchers count will be the value. And that's pretty much it, right? Let's run that page. Scroll down a bit, and here's our chart, right? All the repositories in a bar chart representing the watchers count, right? And the interesting thing is how easy it was to build these things. Again, once we saw Apex solves one critical thing for us, and that is to treat the external RESTful service as it was a table. Once that work is done, we can start adding Apex components over and over again, because Apex knows how to get the data. Apex knows how to treat the data as rows and columns, and all this low-level stuff is not our business anymore. We, as the Apex developers, can concentrate on building components and putting components and business logic together. All the low-level stuff is done by Apex. And this is true regardless of whether we are working with a local table, a table in a remote Oracle database, or in this case, a web source module pointing to an external REST API. Right? Okay, let's get back to the slides. This is what we have seen, right? We have seen that discovery, and pretty much this is what you have seen in the demo as well, right? So that's pretty much concludes the demonstration and the first general overview on how to quickly build applications on external or local data with Application Express. A very nice thing to look at is the statement of direction. So if you're interested in what's the Apex development team working on, what is the future of Apex, then you can always have a look into the statement of direction, which is at apex.oracle.com/SOD. And here you can see that we are working on release 92 right now. And these are the key development areas which the team is working on. So if you're an experienced Apex developers, you know about pop-up LOV and what frequent requirements were over the last years. These will be addressed with the next release, where Apex will contain, or we will plan to introduce greatly enhanced pop-up LOVs. A new component, filterable reports, which is, as it says here, a powerful new way to filter and display your data. So stay tuned for this. We will make the interactive grid, which is the editable report of Apex, able to support external data sources as well. Improvements to data loading, improvements to Oracle Jet libraries, printing, and lots of more stuff, right? Okay, this concludes my demonstration and my presentation on Application Express. I hope you like it, and the best thing after seeing something like this is to go to apex.oracle.com, request a workspace. It doesn't take more than 10 or 15 minutes to get the credentials. It's free, and it allows you to easily try out all the things you have seen here for yourself and really see whether this suits. Thanks a lot for your attention.